Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. And welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast. Andrew is out of pocket, so I had to scream, scam, borrow, and bully for a second seat. I managed to grab this funny-looking guy that looks like the son of Dracula, according to him, though.
What is up, Phil, man? Thanks for having me on, dude. I love being with this awesome background. It's steel jacket background. It's cool.
Yeah, I had when we started streaming on StreamYard, I had to get rid of all the stock backgrounds and stock stuff as fast as possible and kind of stamp our own vibe on the show.
Yeah, I love it. I love the intro. Intro's great. It's almost therapeutic to watch those 9mm fall into the ammo can too, or whatever they are. They 45 or 9s? What are they?
No, they were 9s, and if you ever come to Southeast Louisiana, I can show you the exact spot that was filmed.
I think I could watch that, like at the end of the day, just watch that little waterfall.
It definitely make for
waterfall there.
It would definitely make for a very therapeutic screensaver.
Oh, that's a good call. Yeah, you might want to make that an option.
I might actually want to. Anyway, sitting here gesticulating with James Walton from Prepper Broadcasting Network. James, say hi to the audience.
Hi, audience. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for intermingling with the Prepper Broadcasting Network over these. How long has it been, man? 2 years? I add time to everything because time is going way too fast for me anymore.
No, 2 years sounds about right. I mean, I could go back and dig it up, but yeah, man, it was about 2 years ago that y'all had the incredible freaking lapse in judgment to actually accept us into your gang. I want to call it a gang, not with a bad connotation, but a gang.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a gang for sure. After a certain hour. Yeah, no, it was a large part. Jay Fergie, man, she kept on me. She was telling me, you got to talk to them guys. We already listened and we already loved you guys, so it was a no-brainer. But you get in that. It's being in the headspace that I'm in all the time is like scraping for every listener we can get. You know how it is. You forget that like it would even be desirable to hang out with the Prepper Broadcasting Network. That's the mindset all the time. Is like scraping for everything, trying to spread the word, and then you don't even think like, oh, I'll just start asking people to be hosts. Like it wasn't until Sarah Hathaway that I started actually pursuing people and saying, hey, you should come on the network, because I realized it was beneficial to both of us,
Well, and the funny, like you and I talked about this because, I mean, the situation Andrew and I were in were that we'd kind of hit a crossroads with Matter of Facts where like we felt like we were hitting a bit of a ceiling. And he and I had discussions with other people about, do we stand up our own network? Do we incorporate more shows? Like, what do we do to move the ball forward? And finally, I was sitting down talking to Andrew one day. We were kind of weighing out our options, and I'm like, dude, we know James. We know Prepper Broadcasting Network. We hang out with that entire group of misfits all the time anyway. Like, why reinvent the wheel? And why don't I just reach out to James and say, hey, dude, you want another set of knuckleheads in the grandstands? And you said yes, and that was kind of the end of it at that point. It was like, okay, well, this is going to happen.
Yeah, it was one of the easiest decisions I've made probably in the last 2 years. Oh, I do want to congratulate you on Raising Values, man. You guys knocked it out of the park. I mean, I didn't know that was something that was working on in the background. So when the logo came out, I'm a sucker for a good logo too. You guys' logo's phenomenal. When that logo came out and then the show started cranking, man, it's great. Really. Timely, perfect.
So with regards to Raising Values,
don't tell me it's done.
Oh no.
Okay.
Not unless my wife divorces me. That's the only way the show's going to stop.
At that
point, at that point, it's going to be really interesting to have a podcast in conjunction with a woman I'm no longer married to. But as long as we stay hitched, I think that'll continue. But Raising Values, like my wife and I have been talking for quite a while about, like bringing, like every time she had to second seat in Andrew's absence, she and I did very different topics than what Andrew and I do. I mean, obviously we're married, we're husband and wife, not friend and friend, and our interests align in a different capacity. So it kept feeling like there was this different energy that fit with matter of facts, but could stand by itself. And my wife had been talking about doing her own podcast for a while now. And finally, one day I was like, crazy idea. Why don't you and I buddy up together to do this podcast? We run it with matter of facts, and ended up running it with PBN as well. And it be the kind of show she wanted to do, which was talking about talking about families, talking about marriages, talking about relationships, talking about raising children. It was all the subjects that she was super passionate about, and I am too, because I'm a family man. And it was different enough from matter of facts that it kind of deserved to stand on its own, but it was also like there's so much. I found that there's been this incredible crossover where a large percentage of the matter of facts audience really resonated with it. Because even if they themselves aren't married, they have nieces and nephews and friends. I mean, there are other people in their lives that they care about, and a lot of the topics we talk about are really centered around a married couple and a family, but they're not exclusive to that. They're concerns that the average person really has a right and a reason to be concerned about.
Yeah. No, it's great. The timing is great. The content is awesome. You know, when I first heard you guys on the first matter of facts I heard on PBN with both of you together, it was like, I was kind of rooting for it already. I was like, this ain't bad. The thing about your wife is she really was kind of on the natch behind the microphone. Like, that was surprising. Because, not that I didn't expect her to be, but that anybody would jump on a podcast and just be like, oh, I'm talking. Like, it sounded like you guys were in the living room. Like sweet tea, whatever, just hanging out. And I was like, that's not something that happens with people who just jump on a microphone and start doing a pod. And you put the podcast moniker in front of the conversation, people get all, stiff. And so you guys are just right out of the gates together.
And at the same time, like, I feel like for me and my wife, it was going to be that by default because, like, this podcast has never been about me or Andrew, I don't believe, because, like, I've known Andrew for 7 years now. I mean, yeah, from a distance for a lot of it, but, I mean, you don't talk to a person several times a week for 7 years and not learn who they are. And Andrew and I, throughout the course of this podcast, we never try to portray ourselves as anything. Like, this is just who we are. And when I sit here and I screech and yell and scream bloody murder and spit all over the microphone about the ATF and government overreach and everything, like, that's just me.
Sure,
that's not because I'm trying to play a part or be a character. That's just who I am. And my wife is a very unpretentious person, and when she sits behind the mic and talks, that's just her. That is her opinion. That is her belief. That is her values. That is her as a wife talking to other wives. So, there is no
power of raising values right there. You know what I mean? Because your guys' show is not the first show I've ever watched on, like, how to marriage and how to kids and all that kind of stuff. And that you hit the word is pretentious. The word is pretentious. The word is even just like, you look at some couples and you're like, are these people humans? And you get halfway into the thing and you're like, oh, this is not my people talking about raising kids. And with you guys, it's just like you feel comfortable, And I don't know if it's because I already know you, but you, Phil, have always given off that vibe of like, there's a seat at this table and you could come sit here. You know what I mean? You just always had that presence since I first met you, which is weird because, look at you, right? It's like, how does the guy with the 20-foot beard seem so inviting? Usually, you see somebody like that, you're like, I'm going to cut down that other road. I don't even want to get involved in that.
It's only a foot long now. I had to do some trimming of it last year after prepper camp. It was getting to the point where it was starting to, like, reach my it was reaching my belly button, and it just got to that length where I was like, okay, some of this has got to go someplace.
Rolling over on
So, I had to go to my beard barber and say, cut half of it off. And he, like, almost made me sign a waiver. He was like, he's looking up and down. I mean, you saw my beard at prepper camp. He's like, you want me to cut half of it off? I'm like, yes. He said, you're sure? And I'm like, I will, give me the scissors, I'll do it myself.
You should know by now it's coming back.
Yeah, it is. I mean, hell, it's already gotten back to this.
There you go. See, it's coming back, buddy. Don't worry about it.
So we've come completely off the rails. Only 10 minutes into the show. This
I'm
is just
sorry. I'm a
no. It ain't you. It's matter of facts. This is what happens. But so Prepper Broadcast Network, like I would assume that at least some portion of our listenership that is like, that has been a longtime listener of Matter of Facts is familiar with PBN, and obviously this is going to go on PBN. So if y'all aren't familiar with the network you're already listening to, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to teach me that trick. But like I can remember before we joined Prepper Broadcast Network, what really struck me was the simultaneous diversity and cohesiveness of the network, because like it is kind of built around a shared set of I don't want to call them like ideals or values. It's a shared sense of I want to be able to dig myself out of life's holes. But each show, each host or set of hosts that run every one of those shows has their own perspective on how to do that and how to accomplish that and how to stay out of trouble and how to get out of trouble. And is the answer like traditional prepping and stacking preps, or is it homesteading? And it's always struck me as interesting that when we came into this, like we had lots of questions about how do we take an already existing established show and integrate it into this network? And your answer to me was run your own show. Mm-hmm. I'm not here to micromanage. I'm here to like run your own show. And that's what every one of the shows on PBN was when I came into it. It was 10 different perspectives on how to prep, which impressed me. I mean, it's been interesting to like sit back and listen and realize that every one of these people has their own idea. They all kind of speak around the same language, but in a different accent, maybe is the way to put it.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely some core stuff. One of the core things is the freedom to say what you want to say, uninhibited, and making sure that we get a host on it. I don't necessarily know anything that anyone could say with half a brain that would even bother. I don't think anybody could say anything that would bother me, to be quite honest. But that's one of the core things is, every host, say what you want to say. What is on your heart and mind, that's what you bring to the podcast. You know, Phil, that's how you do the best work. And the other very important thing from a prepping standpoint, and I already knew your show, so I didn't have to have this conversation with you, but with new hosts, I always have this conversation with them is everybody knows you screw up. Don't hide it. I would always tell them, because Jay Fergie hit me to this when she talked about the failure of her garden like 4 years ago. It was one of the first prepper podcasts I think I'd ever listened to. It might have been like 5 or 6 years ago, where a prepper came on the mic and said, I screwed everything up. I just set it up wrong. It didn't work. And I was so blown away by that, Phil. I was like, this is the ballsiest thing in the world. Because for a while, prepper content was like, I know something that you don't know, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. And when I realized the power in preppers go, and you did a great job of it with the last hurricane. When that's what people really like is when you go, oh, I'm human and I messed up, and then this is what I did to fix it, and now I'm even more prepared. Because then they can go like, oh, okay, I've made some mistakes. So those two things, man, that unique perspective, and then being human and being able to say, I totally blew that up. I always hate that subject matter expert business where people get on and try to act like they've never made a mistake. Everything they do is perfect. You know what I mean? And maybe you could be like me one day, because we all screw up. That's just how it goes.
Well, and the thing of it is like, subject matter expert. I don't mind a person being a subject matter expert. What I do mind is, like, from the military, you can take your most hot shit, old experienced SF guy. I promise you, he's been a stupid private, walked into an ambush at least once. Yep. And I think that's kind of that's the impressive part to me about Jordan and about other people who will come out on a platform and say, "Hey, I screwed the pooch on this deal,"
Valuable, man.
and
Very valuable.
it shows humility first of all, which is a very rare commodity
Sure.
in content
Definitely.
creators and social media personalities. I mean, most people they get so tied into playing a part or
Yeah.
being a person or keeping a, like staying in character that they don't ever stop to think about the fact that like there's people that follow them that would probably appreciate a little bit of honesty and vulnerability every now and then, like just like, and I've done it too. So has Andrew. We've both come out and said, hey, the reason why I do this now is because I didn't used to do it, and it got me in a lot of trouble. And that's
it.
why I'm telling you to do it, is not so that I can lord over you and tell you how much better I am than you are, but because I don't want you to have to pay the same price I did to learn this little nugget of information, which was
That
painful.
resonates. That message resonates. That delivery resonates with people more, especially busy people who are, because I always think about the audience as people who have big lives. Everybody's got a big life now. You know what I mean? So many things on the to-do list. And the last thing they want to think is, how can I become a super prepper on top of everything else that I'm doing? And now I have the pressure that, the whole world is coming to this strange revolution, and I have to be prepared for all that too. So it's just a way better way to deliver that. Even in writing, it's the same thing. I find that writing that is do X, Y, and Z, followed up by A, B, and C, and this is what you need to do to be prepared. That stuff is good, but it's always better when it's story driven. It's always better when it's I didn't do this, and this is why it didn't work out. And you create individuals that way as hosts rather than just people who are reading or conveying a top 10 list of preps you need. Right.
Well, and the thing you said about how like everyone has big lives, everyone has full lives. The one of the things that stood out to me is that even though I know we have people on PBN that are legit homesteaders,
Oh yeah.
and homesteading's a beautiful way to prep. It works. It's worked for a long time. Like there's a lot of reasons why a lot of preppers really want to get out of the suburbs, like suburbia hell, like where I'm stuck,
Sure. Yeah.
and move out onto 5 acres, start growing their own food, because it's a really good idea if you can pull it off. But there's also a lot of preppers, and there's a lot of people on PBN that are not in that position yet. Most people, the overwhelming majority of people that I meet in the prepping community are people who live in the suburbs. These poor SOBs live in like the cities, and they try to prep in a 600 square foot, apartment.
What can I grow in the window? I get that a lot.
But in all seriousness, like this is like the challenging thing about prepping is that for all these years, most of your prepper content creators, they were so laser focused on homesteading. They didn't want to entertain any other method of prepping or any other way. Their answer was, you homestead or you're going to starve to death.
Sure.
And I was like, that is not helpful to the
majority
80%
of the population.
to the majority of the population, the majority of preppers. It's whether or not it's realistic or not is irrelevant. They're not going to do it because they live in a city or they live in the suburbs. They work in a certain place in a certain line of work, and moving on to 5 or 10 acres in the middle of nowhere is just not in their deck of cards. Some of us are married to people who don't want to live in the middle of nowhere and demand a little bit of civilization around us. So to me, the answer has always been, in your area, given your circumstances and your lifestyle, let's get you as well prepped as you can be here where you are. I'm going to meet you where you are.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you about homesteading if you don't want to know about homesteading. I would love to homestead, but I can't. So instead, I've focused on having like a month to 6 months worth of what I need to take care of my family. Because guess what? 30 days of preps gets you through a lot of problems.
Oh yeah.
It has gotten us through Hurricane Ida. It's gotten us through plenty of smaller disasters down here in South Louisiana. If you can hold out in your home for 30 days with no incoming supplies and no running water and no power, you are disaster proof to a pretty high bar.
You'll have a plan beyond that. You know what I mean? You'll have 30 days to make a plan if it doesn't get better. You know what I mean? You'll be able to say, okay, we got to go somewhere else and do something else. I don't
Well,
know what that would be, but
and
everybody's got their plan, you know?
and even for the people that have like the barrel of heritage seeds and they're like, well, you're going to run out of food eventually and I'm going to grow my own. It's like, yeah, do you know how long it takes to grow food if you don't already have it in the ground?
Dude,
Like, you're going to be eating those seeds before any of them sprout because you need X amount of food just to get you to the point of that first harvest. It's
gardening sucks. I mean, you
I'm
know,
not a
like
gardener.
as a feed yourself modality, gardening on its own sucks. Really does. I mean, for the amount of years that I've been doing it and now having I did it forever, but because my father did it, but now interweaving into the preparedness and putting it up against things like food storage, like food that just grows in the wild, you know, and meat that lives in the wild. You start to measure up calories and things like that you get out of your garden, and it's like, and then if you're not preserving your garden on top of it, like if you're just the garden, just the food that grows, you eat it. The food that you can't eat in enough time falls on the ground, gets eaten by squirrels, rots. It's pretty crappy prep, to be honest. I mean, unless, like you said, you got rows and time to tend those rows on acres, and you can garden like that. But for the average person, your garden and your survival seed bank and stuff, calories are super low on most of that stuff you're going to grow, and it's not the thing. It's a cool thing to add to food storage. It's a cool, grow your herbs and your medicinal herbs because they make food taste good. Fresh tomatoes in the summer are nice to have and all that kind of stuff. But for my deduction with the garden is cool to have. I can definitely live without the garden. You know what I mean? It's not going to make or break. It's not going to be the thing that saves your family from starving. And that's just my experience with it.
That's one of those things I refer to as having a tool in the toolbox.
That's it.
Like,
Yeah.
not every tool, you have more in your toolbox than just a screwdriver, I hope, because occasionally you run across other things other than screws that
Yeah.
need to be dealt with. So I tell everybody, I'm like, if you want to homestead, cool, but why not homestead and store food and preserve and learn to hunt and learn to forage? Why not learn to do everything you can do? Like in my neck, like in our preps, our default prep tends to be food storage because we live in the suburbs. I live on like an eighth of an acre. We ain't growing much right here. But recently, my wife started growing medicinal herbs because that was one of the things she came back from prepper camp with was a whole head full of knowledge on different old herbal remedies that date back to like Native Americans and borrow from Chinese medicine and things like I continue to preach this because it sounds like the craziest thing on earth, but I've tried it and it works. Goldenrod. It's a weed, right?
Yeah. It's all over prepper camp. I see it every year. I'm like, look at it all.
Do you know that if you brew that into a tea, it is an anti-inflammatory?
Dang, no.
I know because I went to prepper. You probably remember me at prepper camp last year. I was stopped up. I had the worst head cold.
Oh, that's right.
Every morning I would wake up that whole side of the campsite like coughing and hacking. It sounded like I had tuberculosis. It was bad. And I'd already gone through a round of antibiotics and a round of steroids that didn't do anything for it.
Wow.
We came home. I drank goldenrod tea because that was where Gillian learned about it. I drank goldenrod tea and warm honey for 3 days. On the third day, the sinus infection was gone.
Wow.
So you can call it.
Man.
You can call that like gas station medicine. You can call that witchcraft or whatever else you want. I don't care. It works. Every time I start to get the sniffles, I ask my wife, "Where's the goldenrod?"
Yeah.
And she's gone whole hog into that because our concern was about 6-7 months ago we were starting to see like basic medications like fever, like aspirin and Tylenol and ibuprofen and stuff like that running thin on the store shelves. And I was like, what happens if you can't get Tylenol anymore and somebody has 102-degree fever?
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, but you guys took it to the level that people have to take it to if they want to have the herbal medicine discussion. If you're going to grow the herbal medicine, then you got to take the herbal medicine. It's cool to look out the window and be like, oh, look at all those herbal medicinals out there growing. I'm ready. But like you said, for a fact that you can remedy a problem with goldenrod and honey. And that is extremely valuable because there's a lot of people growing stuff and they don't know if it's going to work, if it's going to make things worse. You know what I mean? It's a really bad. Well, Dave Jones says it the best. You can apply this to all your preps. I think it's one of the best. He always says you never want too many firsts. And I just love that saying, because that is so sort of, that is such the prepper problem. We buy stuff, put it away, and we say, if it ever gets real bad, I'm going to pull that stuff out and make a difference. And that's how you run into too many firsts. Now you're taking weird weeds in cups of hot water, and you're eating food you've never eaten before, and you're doing all these firsts, and something's going to bite you, and you're not even going to know what really got you. But
no, that's also why I tell people, I'm like, the best thing you can do for prepping. And I don't want to get too far down this road because it's going to bleed over into a subject I have for later. But like the best thing you can do for your preps is to make it part of your daily life.
Yeah,
like
that's always been your thing, man. I love that about you. It's a lifestyle.
If your thing is food storage, then you go to the grocery store so often, you get two something instead of just one. Bam, food storage is part of your daily life. Like I have this multi-tiered system in my pantry where when the primary pantry runs out, I go to the secondary pantry and I grab something from there and I use to restock the primary pantry. And then I put stuff on the grocery list and I go to the grocery store and I put that stuff back in the secondary pantry to replace whatever, got used. So my pantry is never one deep. It's always at least 2 deep, sometimes 3 deep. And if it's stuff that I also have in long-term food storage, it's 3 or 4 deep, depending on how much I feel like we need for a given period of time. But again, this only works if you discipline yourself of you don't wait till you are at the very last bag of sugar before you go buy more sugar at the grocery store. It's like, no, I have a bag of sugar here, I have a bag of sugar there, and I have a whole bunch of sugar back in that bucket over there. And if this bag of sugar runs empty, I grab that one, I put it here, I continue to bake or do whatever I need to do, I replenish this one. I don't dig into that bucket over there with more sugar in it because that is long-term storage and I don't want to get into that unless I have to. But making this part of your usual routine is the only way it really works. I'm going to use the goldenrod tea and the warm honey to cure the sinus infection rather than go and resort to the drugstore.
Yeah. I mean, the food storage thing, in all honesty, I mean, the efficiency, the value, everybody, no matter how many acres you're on, should have a food storage plan and have dry food. I don't care how much food you produce because it's just the ROI on it is crazy. Like imagine trying to grow and harvest and recreate a 50-pound bag of rice. What a nightmare that. You might have all the land, you might have a rice paddy, you can grow your own rice on. Just imagine the nightmare of trying to do that. You can go get it at Sam's Club for $25. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? Because then even if you're in a homestead, then you have this amazing window of having all these, already processed flour, sugar. Where are you going to get sugar? Sugar, all these processed basics that are already bucketed up or stored up, however you do it. And you get this cushion where you can eat that stuff before you decide, all right, we're going to kick the homestead into third gear now and start raising, sorghum or something like that for our grain. It's just, it's too easy. It's too easy and too good.
And let's bear in mind, our great-great-great-grandparents, when they were farming, they were subsistence farming to provide for themselves, they did food storage.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff doesn't grow in the ground very well in the winter.
Yeah.
So you had to you did all of your harvest in the spring, at the end of summer, beginning of fall. You jarred up everything you possibly could. You preserved it. You did whatever you had to make sure you had food to eat until springtime again. You did all your hunting. You jarred everything up with lots of salt. We did all these things because we understood that for that period of winter, and down here it's not that long, and up where you're at it's a little longer, but for that period of winter, whatever you have around your midsection and in the pantry, that's all you're going to get.
Yeah. And if you're dependent on, again, growing your own, it's not even the end of winter. You know what I mean? It's the end of winter and most of spring. Because right now, if I had to live off my garden right now, I'd be eating onions I'd be sharing onions with the family. That's about all I have that's worth. I mean, we'd have some radish and stuff, but there's nothing substantial growing yet, and that's for most people in most places right now, unless you're like California, Florida, or maybe your neck of the woods. I don't know the growing season in your neck of the woods, but I'm sure it's earlier.
According to the grass in my front lawn, the growing season is now.
But from the time you put that seed in, you got 30, 45, 60 days, so that's after the last frost. So it is, well, that's the whole starving spring, you know what I mean? You hear about the starving spring, that's it. It's like, just because you made it out of winter don't mean you got food if you're growing it alone. So it's just, dried food storage is just, it's too easy. It makes too much sense. I don't care what kind of acreage you're living on. I definitely would have dry food storage no matter what.
Oh, perfect opportunity to segue. So, Louisiana is a subtropical climate, which means we can almost grow anything. Almost grow anything. Except we cannot grow coffee down here. Or bananas, actually. Can't grow coffee or bananas. Our growing season is just a little bit too short. We get a frost and it screws everything up.
Man, I wish Phil Rabalais could grow coffee for Disaster Coffee.
I'm kind of glad I can't, honestly, because as it is, like, your company, Disaster Coffee, has already turned into a gateway drug for some very unhealthy habits in my household.
I love it. I love that you went on your little kick of the roasting to various cracks and colors and the whole 9 yards, man. I thought that was
it's gotten worse, James. I just got a manual espresso press last week.
That's good, man.
So now I've gone like completely down the rabbit hole of making my own espresso and making bougie lattes and everything for my wife. My wife and I have, like, Tuesday and Wednesday, my daughter has a drama club after school. So we have a recurring, like,
hour date. I heard.
Yeah, it's like an hour date time between school letting out when my wife gets out of school from work, because she works at the school, and when we have to pick up my daughter from drama club. So that is our hour. And for the longest time, she liked to go stop by PJ's and get us something from them that was always hideously overpriced. And I sold her on this idea that I'm like, honey, I have an espresso press. Like a very simple manual lever machine. I have an espresso machine. I roast my own beans. I grind my own beans. I've got pretty much most of the stuff like I would need to recreate almost anything you would order from PJ's. Just, why don't I try my hand at making our coffees, and then we go sit by the lake, by Lake Pontchartrain, and drink them and have our date.
How do you steam the milk?
Funny thing, I don't steam the milk, and honestly, I don't prefer the texture of steamed or frothed milk. I rather just flat, and she prefers it that way too.
Oh, wow. Oh, you're in
there. Yeah. So, but today was the first day that I tried to pull 2 shots out of that machine, one right behind the other, and make 2 lattes to bring to the lake. And I'm gonna need to do a little bit of work around my workflow to make that happen in 15 minutes. Because, I mean, this is the thing with like full manual machines, is that there's no boiler, there's no spring. There's not like a spring in the group head or anything. It is full on, like, you pour your own boiling water from a kettle and you pull on the lever to drive the piston down. I mean, it's a full manual machine. It makes pretty daggum good espresso, if I do say so myself, but it is a ton of work, and it's not like the $1,500 machine where you just push a button and put the cup underneath it and it spits out espresso. Yeah. I ain't spending $1,500 on an espresso machine, at least not anytime soon.
No doubt.
But I started down this line of conversation because I blame you for getting me into this, because years and years ago. Yes. So for those that don't know, and shameless plug for Disaster Coffee, like, you somehow got this in your head quite a while ago to offer coffee as a way to help fund Prepper Broadcasting Network.
Yeah, it was. This is awesome. It's so. When I would reach out to sponsors in our neck of the woods now, not like some crazy random sponsor, but like bag people, food storage people. The most common thing I was getting back in 2019 18 into 19, I think it was. Might have been 19 into 20, actually. Um, the most common thing I was getting was, dude, we use Facebook ads and we can target exactly who we want, and they're cheap, and nothing bad is ever going to happen to us with Facebook.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, it was great. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm new. I had lost some sponsors from PBN's original setup because we got rid of the 24/7 live stream and all that. And I was just like, you know what, man? We could just make our own sponsor. I mean, what's the harm in just making your own sponsor, And I got lucky enough to link up with this roaster in Temecula, California. And to be honest, the Bunker Beans, this is the craziest thing. They almost hate us for the Bunker Beans over at the roaster because we're the only company that's allowed to sell them anymore. After COVID, they stopped selling them all completely.
So they don't sell green beans to anybody
Nobody
except
else
Disaster.
gets green beans but Disaster Coffee. If anybody places an order for that stuff, they're like, no, we don't do that. But I guess we got grandfathered in because we were doing it way before. You know what I mean? And so they've been great with us, and they allow us to sell a 5-pound bag of unroasted green coffee beans so Phil can be a scientist on his time off.
Like that one back
there
there
it is
from
right
the
there.
fridge.
Oh my God, dude, I didn't even notice that. I was looking at the ice code this whole time and I didn't even notice that thing was there. Perfect. Yeah, there they are. There they are, the Bunker Beans, man. That was a win. Does your audience know Win? They got to know Win, right?
A fair bit of them probably do. They have been around for a long time.
We really all can blame Win for that idea. Because we were doing our Win and James stand uncomfortably close and talk for 3 hours straight up at your guys' campsite that we do at Prepper Camp. And he told me, you can do the same thing with green coffee beans that you can do with rice. And I said, what? You're pulling my leg, Win. And that was the Bunker Beans. From then on, it was, we're going to do that. We're going to make it available to everybody so that, you can have your bucket of rice and you can have your bucket of coffee too. And, what's your take on roasting? From the first time you did it to now, is it something that when you do it, you're like, oh, Jesus, here we go. Got to roast it.
Now, bearing in mind, some of this is going to be personality dependent. I also reload my own ammo, which there's some commonalities with, and the fact that there's like an X amount of science and a certain amount of art involved. With reloading, it really is very mechanical, very by the numbers, by the books. You're comparing, you're using a slide rule and a set of calipers to like double check dimensions. It's very nerdy stuff. Because if you don't do the nerdy stuff properly, you blow your gun up, which isn't fun. So I enjoy
with the grains, right?
Yeah. So I enjoy reloading. The as a hobby, it's like the end output is extra ammo, which I never mind having around, but I enjoy it for what it is. It's a stress relief because it's like fidget spinners for gun guys, in my opinion. And coffee roasting is definitely like a chore, but I think if you enjoy the process, it's a chore you don't mind, if that makes sense. Think of it like if you have a dog and you love the dog, but you got to pick up dog poop. Picking up dog poop is not fun, but you do it because you appreciate having the dog. Well, I enjoy coffee roasting. The process is very interesting. It's super, I have found that with a lot of things I do, I can pop a cigar in my mouth and just kind of zone out. Cannot do that with coffee roasting. I am completely in the moment, committed to what I'm doing, paying very close attention to what I'm doing. I'm listening to the coffee. I'm smelling it. I'm seeing it. All my senses are in that little pot telling me what is the coffee doing right now, because how fast you can heat it and when you take the heat away has this tremendous impact on the end product. So I would tell anybody that any Disaster Coffee customer that wants to get Bunker Beans, I would encourage you to get a couple of bags for your long-term preps. I've heard, with regards to storing green coffee beans, I've heard everything from 6 months to 25 years as far as storage. I think it's highly dependent on how well you store it. My personal method is I put them in a 5-gallon bucket, I throw an oxygen eater into it, and then I hammer a gasketed lid down onto it. in a hypoxic environment with no UV infiltration and very low humidity, I can't see why coffee beans would go bad anytime soon. I mean, the things that are going to happen to a bean to make it go bad, quote unquote, is oxidation, which is already slowed down a hell of a lot because coffee beans have carbon dioxide trapped inside of them. That's one of the things that gets released when you roast it, which is why once you roast coffee beans, it starts to go stale within 7 to 10 days. And the other problem, other than oxidation, is UV, which shouldn't be a problem if you keep it in the bag.
Yeah.
So I would say
Definitely not in the bucket.
yeah, but the thing of it is like there's not a lot of good data points on long-term green bean storage because the name of the game for specialty and artisan coffee is the freshest cup possible. So they're constantly pushing for the newest beans to go into the roaster possible and the shortest time from the roaster to the end cup. So like there's no push to achieve that data point of, well, if we store it for a year, is it still good? Because that's not what the coffee industry is trying to do. They're trying to get it from farm to cup as fast as humanly possible, knowing that between storage, roasting, shipping, and everything else, you're going to lose X amount of time regardless.
Yeah.
But I would say that for a bunker bean customer, get a couple of bags, put them in long-term storage. How you store them is up to you. I have my method. I think it works. Take 1 5-pound bag and use that 5-pound bag to practice coffee roasting, because the same conversation we were having earlier about if you don't practice with your preps, it's another first.
There you go.
If you have 10 or 15 or 20 pounds of green beans sitting in your freaking closet and the world turns upside down or the shipping lanes get blocked up or China friggin' airdrops troops on us, them 20 pounds of green beans are not going to do you any daggum good unless you know how to process them and turn them into drinkable coffee. And it's not difficult, but you'd have to know how to do it. And I will say happily that I've probably roasted at this point probably 15 pounds of green beans.
It's good.
Maybe 20. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but like you got to stop and think about this. Like, like it takes me like 2.5 ounces of beans to load like an 8 or 9 cup French press. I've roasted 20 pounds of beans, learning the ins and like. I roasted a lot of this 2.5-3 ounces at a time in like a little bitty roasting pan about that big.
It's the best way to do it, I think. The small batch gives you the ability to really pay attention. I think.
Yes, to a degree. See, I have that roasting pan lives over here in my camping gear now. And that and my first hand grinder stays in there. If I'm ever at the campsite and I just feel like roasting some beans, I can just roast them over a campfire or over a burn or whatever. I mean, it's a good way to kill time.
Sure.
But my weekly production now
I love that.
is I roast 13 ounces of green beans, which because of weight loss turns into like 11.5, 12 ounces sometimes worth of beans. I mean, the beans increase in size and lose weight at the same time during the roasting process. But I'm roasting about 13 ounces of green beans a week to keep up with my weekly coffee habit, which I'll be the first to admit, I drink enough coffee to alarm most healthcare professionals. But I don't care what most of them think anyway, so,
Yeah.
My blood pressure and my heart rate are just exactly where they're supposed to be. So until something goes haywire, I'm going to assume that my little bit of coffee isn't hurting anybody.
Yeah. I need a kidney test to be 100% sure. Then I'll feel good.
Well, you got to think about it like this, though. Every doctor says drink water. I use my water to make coffee, so that counts.
There you go. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I don't give health advice on this show.
You were talking about how quickly coffee goes stale, and this is another funny part about how we set up Disaster Coffee. I didn't, when I was thinking about let's create a sponsor, I definitely didn't want to get into another business that I had to spend another, 10, 20 hours a week on. So I was like, I guess you could drop ship coffee, drop shipping has a kind of a negative connotation in my head because it usually is affiliated with crappy products. You know what I mean? It's like I got a drop ship bug out bag and it just falls apart off your, But it turns out that the best thing in the world that you can drop ship is coffee. I don't think there's a better product on the planet that you can do better because just like you were saying, Phil, the beans are batch roasted every day. And when you place an order with Disaster Coffee, your order is scooped out of those batch roasted beans and then mailed to you. Like I have no stock of coffee at my house. There's no coffee in a warehouse somewhere waiting to be shipped off, and it's just like it took me some months to realize like, oh, this is the best way to do it because it's getting roasted for your order, ground if you want it that way, and then shipped right to your house. And when it comes, it's like, oh my God, what is in the mailbox?
I will happily say that like if you out there in listener land have never bought truly premium coffee,
yeah, that's what Disaster Coffee is for sure.
You deserve to give that to yourself at least one time and just ignore the cost of the bag of coffee and just try it. You don't have to try anything like really crazy and off the registry, oh Jesus, what's the phrase I'm looking for here? Off the reservation. You don't have to try anything really crazy. Now we're not talking about like Kopi Luwak or anything, any kind of any of that kind of nonsense. I'm just talking about a true premium coffee. Just try it one time, and you might be impressed what the difference is. But like I can truly say, because I have only stopped buying bags of Disaster Coffee because at this point I am like whole hog into roasting my own. And like I've had to kind of commit to that to really develop the skill set and get good at it.
Oh, it's great.
Not to mention, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, nothing against Disaster Coffee. Every single, a matter of fact, I tried Pandemic recently, which kind of has me like rethinking the whole thing about dark humor, because I love dark humor. There's a reason why Andrew and I picked that roast for our coffee, because it was our favorite by far, but Pandemic is like a really, really close second.
It's a good one. Yeah.
No surprise though. I mean, it's a 6 bean espresso roast. It's gonna be something that tickles my fancy.
It's easily the biggest seller every year. Pandemic is.
Yeah.
But right now, just so you know, my sister is sitting on a Pandemic and a dark humor at her house right now. That's what she's nursing.
If you like dark roast, it's hard to go wrong with either one of those.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that the thing of it is, though, is that once you make that jump to just go out and buy bunker beans and really invest the time into roasting them, you will start to look sideways at the rest of Disaster's line. Not because it's not good coffee, but because I know that there is no way in creation that Disaster Coffee can roast coffee and get it into my cup 24 hours after it's roasted. Yeah, but with green beans, I can do that. I can literally roast coffee, let it friggin' gas off for 12 hours, and then grind it up into espresso shots or drip or whatever else I want that fast. And like, there's no, like, it's like what really got me looking at Disaster Coffee was I was looking at like Folgers, because there's a Folgers plant like, I don't know, maybe 150 yards away from where I work, which is really fun on the drive into work every now and then, because like if you have your air conditioning set to outside vent and the roasters are fired up and the wind's blowing out of the south.
No. Oh my God.
As I'm driving into work, it smells like somebody just turned over a whole bucket of friggin' Folgers in the backseat of my car. It smells like coffee for miles.
That would be trouble for me.
Oh, it's glorious.
The addiction starts firing away. You know what I mean? Brew another pot at 8:19 p.m.
Well, I'm usually drinking my cup of coffee while smelling it, so it's just pleasant.
That's a good turn.
But I was thinking about like, okay, like Folgers, they get their green beans like everybody else gets their green beans, because like we don't grow coffee here in North America. The growing season isn't right for it, and the climate and the altitude and everything else. Yeah. But in any case, so they get their green beans in like everybody else does, but then they roast them in an enormous friggin' plant over here. They package up, I don't know, like, 2 kajillion of these little red cans that you see in the grocery store. Yeah. They ship them all over the country, probably all over the world, but all over the country. And then it sits in a warehouse for who knows how long before it gets to the store shelf, before it shows up on your pantry, in your pantry. And I started adding up like all of the time involved here, and I'm like, okay, optimal consumption from roast to cup is supposedly 3 to 10 days. That's impossible with cold coffee. It can't be done. But with Disaster Coffee, because it gets roasted, and then if you order it today, tomorrow it's in a bag, in a box with a shipping label on it, and it's coming to your house. So you can get coffee roasted recently enough to be in that magical little window. It's possible. But it's only possible with a small volume roaster that does per order.
Yeah. Yeah, we stumbled into that, like I said. But there's some really fun ones, man. For if you're listening to Phil and saying I really want to try something really super nice. We do I think your audience probably would most appreciate the Uprising, which is our 4th of July coffee. We don't really press it too much. And
I tried that.
That's awesome. Yeah, they age it 30 days in a whiskey barrel. I can hear mouse movements on people's desks right now. Click, 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 click. Disastercoffee.com. And it's a great coffee. It is an expensive coffee. It's expensive, and it's one of those things that, when the 4th of July comes along, that's what you want to have to celebrate. You know what I mean? It's one of those, but you do owe it to yourself to have some premium. If you're a crazy addict like Phil and I, then why not? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and if you're prepping on poverty wages, at a bare minimum, get some bunker beans and start looking into how to roast them. It's
for sure.
You can roast coffee beans like and now let me just head this off the pass. I understand that there are purpose-made coffee roasters that cost $300. I understand that there's roasters that cost $600, $1,000, $2,000, and keep on going up into the commercial line. I understand all that, but I also know you can roast coffee for under $100. Not that difficult. So if you want to chase the dragon of like that ultimate fresh cup of coffee for pennies an ounce more than what it'll cost you to get a big can of Red Folgers, like get bunker beans and just try your hand at roasting them. You are going to screw up. I am telling you that right now. All the research you do, all the friggin' work you put in, you are going to royally screw up at least a batch or two. You're going to burn the holy hell out of some of them so bad even you won't want to drink it. I drink dark roast as a default. I like the Uprising, but honestly, I found it to be on the weak side.
Yeah, I can see that for the dark roast crowd, for sure.
And Uprising's a medium roast. It's not a breakfast blend. It's not anything light, but for my taste, I want coffee that's going to grab me with a fistful of the shirt and give me a right hook first thing in the morning. And like Uprising just wasn't that for me. Like I like dark humor. I like Pandemic. I like dark roast coffee. I made a batch of coffee, James, that I roasted so freaking dark. When I ground it up and brewed it, it tasted like I was licking an ashtray. I burnt that coffee. I burnt it badly. It was horrible. It tasted... It didn't... Now, I still drank it. Because, in for a penny, in for a pound.
There you go.
And there were some nice, very, very energetic flavors in there, but it also tasted like a campfire.
Yeah.
So I have since learned to be a little less enthusiastic with the heat and a little more diligent about the agitation.
Sure.
And, things are working out better. So I would just tell that to anybody. If you're a hardcore coffee drinker and if you have 15 minutes a week for an extra habit/hobby, then roasting your coffee beans, it's fun. It's a really cheap way to get really good coffee. And if you store bunker beans, you kind of need to know how to do it anyway.
Yeah. And if you want to be a king of the neighborhood, be the guy who has coffee when it's all gone. You know what I mean? People will come to you. I can promise you that. Hey, we'll have coffee tomorrow. Swing by.
Oh,
I'll
and
be
this is
there.
also my pitch for those of you that haven't started in on the crack cocaine of the coffee world and gotten into espresso. Espresso is a way to get a very, very highly concentrated amounts of coffee out of relatively small amounts of grounds.
There you go.
Like my espresso press to make I don't know, about an ounce and a half shot of coffee that I can dilute with hot water or with milk to make a latte or to make like an Americano. But that only takes me like 10 or 11 grams of coffee beans.
Wow.
Yeah. You want to
Got
talk
to be
about being able to
grandma
make.
fine, right? Is that a necessity? I
Coarse,
mean, that's how we learned it, but
coarser than you would think. You and I'll talk after the show about the specific equipment I have, but
okay.
coarser than you would think, but finer, much finer than you're ever going to use for like drip coffee.
Yeah.
But in any case, I'm determined to get more people to embrace espresso as a way to make their preps last longer.
Good call. I never thought about it that way. It's a good call.
So here we are, like 56 minutes into the show, which means we're going to knock out these two topics together and really quickly. I feel like we've already talked about what preppers are. Like, preppers are people that don't want to sit around and wait for FEMA to show up to help them when all hell breaks loose. Preppers are people that don't like being screwed over by life or inconvenienced by life even. You know, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there that think prepping is certain things and certain activities, but I'm like, at the end of the day, prepping's just a life philosophy.
For sure. 100%. I think there are people who also have realized that we kind of overshot the comfort and convenience target. You know what I mean? And they're like, man, in reaching this level of comfort and convenience, we forgot all kinds of cool stuff. You know, and preppers are the people that are like, let's turn around and get some of that cool stuff. Let's get some of that goldenrod and honey tea back in our life. You know what I mean? Let's get some of that wilderness back in our life. And for me, prepping just gave me the okay to do that. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that it's a big thing now, so people can get that okay. You know, because it's weird. It was use prepping that way. You know, use it as a way for you to do the things that you've always kind of wanted to do, but were maybe worried about it. You know, like going out in the woods and picking a weed and making tea out of it. You know what I mean? Or going from being a person who's maybe spent your life kind of ineffectual and maybe even ineffective, maybe even a little weak, and then becoming someone strong and capable of defending themselves. You know, that was my position. You know, all my life I was a little pale, skinny, heavy metal listening, picked on, painted fingernails kid. You know, the idea that someone like me could ever fight, carry guns, do all that kind of stuff was like, and becoming a prepper and saying like, oh, if the world ends, maybe I should be prepared for that kind of stuff. Just gives you license, and preppers are just people who are taking those things on. It really is just taking back what it means to be human and what people have done before us forever, just forever.
And I think the killer of it is like I think back to all the preppers. If I had to put all the preppers I've met in a room and I asked all of them, why did you start prepping? I hear not the same answer, but I hear the same tone from every last one of them. Every one of them has had a period in their life where life kicked them square in the teeth. It was a hurricane, it was a blizzard, it was job loss, it was some kind of it was what I refer to as a personal doomsday.
Yeah, that
Because
helps.
the very next
Same with
topic
me.
is misconceptions in prepping. But like a lot of people when they hear prepper, they think, oh, doomsday prepper, like you're getting ready for the end of the world. And I always tell people like, well, I'm not getting ready for the end of the world. I'm getting ready for the end of my world, my personal doomsday. When I wake up after a Cat 4 hurricane steamroll my house, I have 2 trees sitting on my house and one in the front yard. That was my doomsday. It wasn't the first one though. The first one was Hurricane Katrina. I watched that rip New Orleans in half, and I watched civilization break down. I watched hospitals emptied out. I watched police, half of them didn't even show back up to work. I watched the city eat itself, and I watched people just surviving in a third world country in the United States of America for months. And I thought to myself at that moment, I'm like, what would I do if I couldn't leave? Like if I couldn't evacuate my family, if I were stuck here for some reason, how would I keep my family whole in this hellhole, in this environment? And that was when I started. That's when I became a prepper. It was the answer to that question of how do I do A, B, C, X, Y, Z when I can't go to Rouse's and I don't have electricity and I don't have running water. Like, and that sounds like, oh, you're getting ready for like the zombie apocalypse. And I'm like, no, I'm getting ready for what I saw after a major hurricane. I saw it happen. And I watched it happen twice in in the last 10 years.
Twice in 10 years, man, The idea that you wouldn't be prepared for it is bonkers. The idea that someone could watch that happen and go like, oh, back to life as normal. We'll just hope we dodge the next bullet. Yeah.
Well, and that is the frustrating part, though, is like after Hurricane Ida, like after we made sure that like, the five other families on our street, everybody was okay, everybody made it through the night. And we kind of touched base with everybody to figure out what's everybody's plan, who's staying, who's leaving, assess the situation in the neighborhood. And it was maybe the next day we really started becoming aware of the fact, because like our the water holding tank that services our neighborhood got smashed by a pine tree. So the morning after Ida, we didn't have running water, which wasn't an issue for us. We've got a 28-day supply of bottled water sitting on the shelf. We had a rainwater catch, so we were in okay shape. But we had neighbors who literally woke up the day after Ida and they didn't even fill their bathtubs before the hurricane. And that's like
an eye-opening experience.
That is like step one. Every state, parish, and local organization always tells you fill your bathtub before a hurricane.
Sure.
And these people didn't. And I don't know. I don't know how to reach people that like miss out on the most basic things, and then the memory of being screwed by that doesn't stick around long enough to prepare them for the next time it happens.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that definitely highlights what a prepper is. It's being a person that the whole world has spent a long time looking at going, you're a crazy person. And then you spend your time looking at them in a disaster going, you're a crazy person. You didn't even fill your bathtub up with water, man. What? It's the easiest thing you could do. That was 2020 on for us, right? 2020 on for us was everybody went, oh, they're not crazy. We're the crazy ones. We don't have any food. We're fighting over toilet paper.
I will say this much: there may have been a moment of mirth in 2020 during the great toilet paper apocalypse and COVID and all that.
Yeah, we all.
But like,
that.
Yeah,
a little.
Well, no, like, I've told this story before. I don't know if I told it to you specifically, but like that very first week of COVID, and here we are. It's April 2023. We have 3 whole years of data now to reflect upon and make our own decisions. But the first week of COVID, when it hit the shores and they started sending kids home from school, no one really knew how bad this was going to be.
Yeah.
Because, like, we all knew we couldn't depend on China to be honest with us about anything. And there wasn't data really coming in from the rest of the country, from the rest of the world fast enough for us to really make any judgments. So, like, my wife and I sat down and had that conversation of, what do we do? And I in typical Phil Rabalais fashion, I looked at my wife and I said, you're asking me to do a threat analysis with no information. So, well, no, but
they put
that being the hand I was dealt, do a threat analysis for your family with no available information. Assume worst case scenario, lockdown.
Yeah.
And we were literally prepared to deck screw the front door shut for 28 days and let whatever happened burn through the population. And I told my wife, I'm like, we don't leave this front yard. We don't interact with other people. And in 7 days, we're going to know how bad this is. Because in 7 days, either the entirety of New York City and San Diego and San Francisco and Los Angeles will implode in the next 7 days, or it won't. And if it doesn't, then we're going to know how bad this is. And if it does, there's our answer. Leave the front door shut.
There you go. Yeah,
But I
great
tell
one.
people this after the fact, and I'm like, I only had the ability to make that assessment because we already had the things we needed to stay here for a month with no utilities, with no extra food. We had several months of food and home goods and supplies and toilet paper and everything else. It wasn't about, oh, well, we're going to sit here and eat MREs and ramen for the next 6 months. Like, no, I have food to last for months. My family will not starve. Whatever comes, comes.
That's it.
But if you don't have those, if you don't have that mindset, you don't have those preps, you don't have that as an option to say, I'm going to lock my front door and see what happens. It's like, no, I have to go out and get groceries or we're not going to be able to eat tonight. But I know people that live like that. They don't have 3 days worth of food. They may not have 3 minutes worth of food. But so let's round this out.
Sure.
You and I have probably heard every single misconception about what preppers are. Most of it we've probably said ourselves, like truth and jest or a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But I feel like it bears reflecting upon.
Yeah.
So, like you said a minute ago, preppers are crazy people.
Yeah.
Like,
Huge
people are preppers because there's the screws are most of the screws are loose and a couple are missing.
Fear is another big one. Fear is another big one that people think you must be afraid all the time because you do all this crazy stuff. And I can tell you, my life in the early years was all about fear. I was scared of everything. I was scared of everything till probably I was 18. And then from the time I was a dad on has been nothing but a lack of, even in the face of the world today, I'm less afraid than I have ever been in my life. Like, preppers are people who are not afraid because, just like Phil said, Phil's sitting there and he knows 100% my family will not starve. Do you know that? How many Americans can say that honestly? My family will not starve in a collapse that lasts or whatever for 3 months, whatever it is, 2 weeks. You eliminate those layers of fear, and that's a wild one that people look at preppers and think they're paranoid and they're scared. And in most cases, it's like, man, we're sleeping like babies,
Yeah, I think Sarah said that at prepper camp, like this past year, actually. She said, what do we have to be afraid of?
Yeah.
Like, we're the people that spend all this time training our minds, training our bodies, training with firearms, training in martial arts. We're the people that spend all this time putting back food and water on the shelf and putting back medical supplies in, being prepared in case all hell breaks loose. We're the people who put all these plans in place. What do I have to be scared of?
Exactly.
It's like, again, Hurricane Ida, because that's my most recent experience. But like, Hurricane Ida was terrifying while it was happening. Because, you're sitting in a hallway in the dark, all the lights are out, all hell is breaking loose outside the house, trees are falling. It was not a fun time. My wife still gets very on edge whenever there's a bad thunderstorm that rolls through. But afterwards, the next morning, we were all alive. We walked out. So we walked out the back door because you couldn't get out the front of the house because of all the trees. That took some chainsaw work to get that straightened out. But we walked out the back door. We assessed the house. I put a tarp over the hole that was in the roof. We checked the joists and everything to make sure that the house wasn't about to fall on us. And then we got our preps out. I pulled water bottles off the shelf. We pulled 5-gallon buckets out of the rain catch to give ourselves bucket showers and everything. And we had power stations. We had everything we could need to survive in that environment. Hell, the day after Ida, my daughter flew a kite in the front yard because it was windy.
Go have fun, honey.
Because we weren't worried about where we're going to get food, water. We weren't worried about where we're going to get shelter. We weren't worried about any of that. We'd already solved all those problems. We solved that months and years before Hurricane Ida steamrolled us.
That's
the only problem we had was cell towers were down, and we had family members we couldn't get a hold of until they came back up. There's only so many ways I can fix those problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one.
But
I'd say demographics. Demographics is another huge one.
oh
I've
yes,
seen Business Insider.
all the white rednecks,
Yeah, they've
the
thrashed the prepping community about it being all white dudes, and
old white dudes.
that too. Yep, old white dudes, and I'm not even old yet.
No, that's the hilarious part of that misconception is that like yes, okay, I am a shaved head white guy with a beard halfway down my chest. I kind of own all that. And I'm also a military veteran, which is like, the next stereotypes that they're all
Sure.
military
Yeah.
vets. But I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
Like
Most of the hosts are.
just barely a millennial. Like
Yeah.
I wish I'd have been thought of a couple years earlier so I could be a Gen Xer. but I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
I make boomer jokes for God's sakes. I apologize to my father about them, but I make them.
I'm telling you. Prepper camp really shows that. Prepper camp shows the demographics are not what people think. You go there and you see who's at prepper camp and you go, oh, wow, this thing is deeper than I thought,
Look, when I go to prepper camp and in the same row of seats at a class, and I'm not saying all these people were in the same row at the exact same time, but I've seen them all. These are real people. There was an interracial couple, looked to be about in their mid to late 20s. Young black man, young white woman. Both of them had big old gauges and hoops in their ears. And I don't want to stereotype anybody, but, they would not have been in a place like San Diego, Portland, some lib shit hellhole.
Yeah.
They would not have looked at in a place like that. So you can use that to fill in the rest of the gaps. Next to them was an old white boomer lady in no shit flats and pearls with her hair done up, wearing looked like she just come from a PTA meeting.
Yeah.
And then you have me and you and a bunch of people that are wearing like a variety of mostly like hiking and utility pants, some denim, t-shirts. You've got a couple of guys running around looking like they robbed a freaking army surplus store because all they're wearing is camouflage. Like, I wasn't even thinking Win. Win's a little more low key than that. I'm talking about the guys that were wearing like the old school, like, was it the M851 like woodland camo?
Yeah.
Like,
Good point. Yeah.
the old school stuff. And then we've got like kids, and we've got looks like suburban Midwest moms running around wearing Patagonia. It's like anybody that could try to lay claim to preppers being a demographic, I would love to just bring them to prepper camp, sit them down in a chair, and just have them people watch for an hour.
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
Your perception will be shattered by the sheer diversity of different people who walk across your path.
I think there's another great example of how that really helps this play out. Every year at prepper camp, we do a tinfoil hat contest that was created primarily as a joke on the air that we brought to life, and it's a good time. The second year winner of the tinfoil hat contest was a 9-year-old girl who was at prepper camp, and she took it so seriously that she even made her bearded dragon a tinfoil hat. Okay, so it's
I love it.
There's that level of diversity, in the prepping community, and that's pre-2020. Now it's even, the ladies' spider sense went off 100% in 2020. It was such a beautiful thing to see. So I know it's even deeper now.
I'm gonna tell you, mama bears get real protective when the cubs are threatened, and that's another misconception is that right behind the whole all preppers are old white men is this idea I see that like preppers are not welcoming to like racial minorities, to women.
Yeah, that's a good one. You're right.
And that drives me crazy because like I'm going to say that in any group of people, there's a couple of people that are just dirtbags. Like let's be honest. Every group has them.
Yeah.
And when I identify them, I run them off as fast as possible. However, like most of the preppers I know have been like begging women to get into prepping for freaking years. We've been begging people like, would you please just go get a freaking flat of Vienna sausages and tuna fish and put it on your shelf just in case something happens. Like
Sure.
we've been kind of, because like the prepping community and the pro Second Amendment gun guy community tend to have a lot of commonality.
Oh, yeah.
Like both communities have been begging people other than old white men racial
Women
minorities and women.
specifically.
Yes, begging them to get into
Carry
those
a
spaces.
gun, please.
Because we recognize that like every single person that preps is one less victim. It's one less person that's going to be sitting there screwed with their hand out when something bad happens to them. And like it drives me crazy when somebody says, "Oh well, that group, if you don't look like them or talk like them or act like them, you're not welcome." When
Yeah.
it couldn't be further from the truth. The old white boomer lady at prepper camp was seriously like raising her hand and asking questions and had a notepad, was taking notes. No one gave her a hard time. Everyone was polite to her. Everybody answered her questions. She was asking questions to people like in the classes after the classes.
Sure.
Everybody was more than happy to talk to her about anything because she wanted to know. She was taking information back. I'm assuming for a mag, just kind of, reading the tea leaves. Or it could have been a family group. She was the scout for a larger party.
Yeah, for sure.
But like everybody was more than happy to talk with her and share anything they could with her because she wanted to know, and that's the only excuse anybody needed. It drives me crazy when people. Now, admittedly, there are some gatekeepers in the prepping community, but there's not as many as most communities have. Like we tend to be very, like especially in this group, it's usually like, hey, you walking by on the road, come over here and have a sip of whiskey and let's talk and get to know each other. Like we don't let you stand outside the fire for very long.
Right. Well, they'll be not mentioned very quickly. You'll never hear the names of people who are gatekeepers on the Prepper Broadcasting Network because we'll just make sure that they don't even exist in our world. You know what I mean? It's like, there's none of that.
Yeah, probably the only other misconception. Well, we've already talked about the misconception about everybody's getting ready for doomsday when a lot of us are getting ready for like personal, individual doomsday. But like about the only other misconception I constantly hear levied against preppers is the fact that like preppers
Hoarding's a big one.
Hoarding.
We get that a lot. You guys are hoarding. You guys are the ones who hoard. It's like, you saw 2020. You know who did the hoarding. You saw the guys buying up all the hand sanitizer and reselling it. We do these things take time, Phil. I'm sure you can attest to it. Most people don't even have, most preppers, and we talk about who the majority of preppers actually are. They're not people on 50 acres with 50 grand in the bank for, building another mill or whatever.
And most of them are multimillionaires either.
Yeah, exactly.
They're working class people that work a full-time job, sometimes a couple of part-time jobs. They're families where both husband and wife have to work and pinch pennies to prep. I mean, like the average
time. Yeah, there's no hoard buy. There's no let's go spend $10,000 on preps this weekend, honey, and hoard some food. It takes years to get 6 months worth of food on the shelves. If you're doing it, on a budget.
I was talking to a buddy of mine years ago who he kind of was behind the power curve. About 2020 was when he finally got his little button gear on like buying guns, buying ammo, buying mags, and more recently he started talking about, hey, what do I need to do to start storing food? So I have planted the seeds and I can see them starting to sprout, and I'm very, very happy that I finally gotten him on the wagon. But
Welcome to the next level.
Oh yes. But the cool part of that was like he made a comment one time about like the stuff I have accumulated. He was just speaking about like guns and ammo at that point because he was at a point where he was like buying guns, but he wasn't really like, I was like, hey dude, you really need to get like a bunch of mags for that gun. You need to get a bunch of ammo. He's like, well, and he was like, well, it's easy for you, say, Phil. You've got like so many thousands of rounds of ammo. You reload, you do this, that, and the other. You've got all these components on the shelf to reload more. And I'm like, but it ain't like that just happened. Like you do understand that I started reloading about the time I started this podcast, which would have been about 2016. So prior to the last election cycle and COVID, when everything around guns and ammo and reloading went ballistic on price, I had already spent several years stacking components, stacking primers, stacking powder, getting ready for the day when prices would double, and I wasn't disappointed. So it's like I told him, I'm like, yes, I do have a fair amount, but I didn't get all this yesterday. I got I got a lot of this by saying, like, okay, I have a $50 a month ammo budget, $50 a month. So what I would do back when I was really, really broke and couldn't afford to even go out to the range and train that often, but I would take that $50 and I would just put it away in the checking account. And the next month, $50 more. And the next month, $50 more. And I would watch a couple of websites for when ammo would go on sale, and I'd buy 1,000 rounds.
That's it.
And now that might mean I only buy like 1,000 rounds 2-3 times a year. But I would only shoot, like 2 or 3 mags every couple of months.
Yeah.
So I had the rest of that 1,000 rounds sitting there. And that's how you build up an ammo stock. And when you go to the grocery store and you're like, oh, I need 2 cans of green beans. Well, cans of green beans aren't that freaking expensive, so I'll just get 2 more. And that's how you get a whole bunch of green beans on the shelf. Like, you got to build this stuff up over time. And I see those people that they look at the prepper mansions and the bunkers that are all underground and old nuke silos, and they're like, well, I'm not rich. I can't do that. And I'm like, but most of us can't do that either.
Sure.
Yet here we are.
Yep. Takes time, no doubt.
Well, it takes time, and it also takes like meeting a person where they are. Like if they're prepping on $100 a month budget, then you prep for $100 a month. Sometimes it's all you can afford. Sometimes people can't even afford that. That's when nerdy financial Phil puts on his business school hat and starts talking about like what can we rearrange, what debt can we eliminate, like what can we do in your monthly budget to find you more money to prep.
Sounds like a consultation service, though.
No. I know just enough about finance to be really dangerous. I give unsolicited advice for free, which means if it blows up in your face, I'm not legally responsible for it. But I also tell people, I'm like, most of the stuff that I advise people to do when it comes to budgeting and finance, like crack a Dave Ramsey book. It's nothing I invented. I'm not a rocket scientist when it comes to finance. It's just, it's principles that, I don't know, dads used to teach their sons this crap. I don't know when they stopped, but like,
It is refreshing, though, to hear it on a prepper show. To hear a guy with a gun hanging in the background, to hear him saying, here's how you should probably save your money, pay down your mortgage. Here's how you should do X, Y, and Z, because it's like we talked about earlier with PBN, those topics that are outside of the cool guy stuff are so valuable. They're so valuable to people.
Yeah. Well, and to round out common misconceptions, like to me, what separates real prepping from the mainstream perception of prepping is like real prepping is having a couple $1,000s in a savings account, because why would it be there except for emergencies?
Yeah.
Real prepping,
cash, right? Yeah.
Real prepping is having cash in your house, because every now and then the debit cards stop working or people don't want to take checks. I mean, you can say it's never going to happen, but I can say you mean may never happen again, because I've seen it happen.
Oh man.
And you can call a person crazy for prepping for an emergency, but you cannot call a person crazy for prepping for the second time an emergency happens.
I just want to say this in terms of the credit cards and machines and how close we could be to that. There on Monday night in Richmond, Virginia, we had the Northern Lights over top of our city. Literally. The Aurora Borealis was right up there. That's because the Earth's getting whacked by the sun. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen. It's never happened since I've been here. So, if that gets too strong and you don't have cash at home, then you don't buy anything. That's that simple. So.
Well, and the prepper financial advice I usually give people is, I'm like, understand that having cash will be worth something for about 3 days longer than debit cards will.
There you go.
Because electronic fund transfer, debit cards, credit cards, they're ubiquitous in society now. That wasn't the case 30 years ago when I was young. I can remember a time when it was a situation to get an out-of-state check cashed. So I'm a millennial, but I'm just barely a millennial. Like I'm in that weird in-between generation. Yeah. But like I can remember that being a thing. It's not really a thing anymore. But the moment debit cards stop working, cash is going to be worth something for about 3 days. Because after 3 days of debit cards not working, cash isn't going to be worth anything either. There will be nothing left to buy, and nobody's going to want your paper.
There you go.
So at that point, that's why I tell everybody invest in ammo, beans, and rice.
And bunker beans.
And water. Oh, bunker beans, yes. whoever keeps the coffee flowing is going to be the most popular guy on the whole block. I could be a warlord of South Louisiana as long as I keep the minions stocked in coffee.
That's it, man.
I need to put that on a shirt.
That's a good
Lord Humongous with a coffee cup in his hand.
Or maybe
give me the coffee.
Pan. Yeah, man. Well, it's been a blast, Phil. As per usual, man.
Yeah, man. I don't know what I really expected to happen, but I know every time you and I get together, we kind of like, it's like taking two squirrels and giving them methamphetamines and putting them in a box together. And they just run around each other the whole time. We never know where the conversation's going to go.
Now, that's a shirt. It's a 3-block, The squirrels, the meth, the box. How to podcast.
So, I feel like this is almost superfluous, but like, where does everybody find Prepper Broadcasting Network?
Yeah, well, if you listen to podcasts, we're there wherever you're at. If it's Stitcher, Spotify, whatever, wherever you listen to them, we're there. If you wanna dig deeper into archives and stuff like that, the best place to do that is prepperbroadcasting.com. And if you're looking to get hit with an avalanche of prepping, how to spreadsheets, knowledge, information, templates, videos, audio, instruction, go to pbnfamily.com and check out the member website, because it's become a tidal wave. It's outrageous. So that's about it, though.
And Disaster Coffee, disastercoffee.com.
Disastercoffee.com. Yeah, it's always open 24/7.
Now, let me just say this: like, I don't make a dime off of recommending Disaster Coffee. James is my witness. I have turned down money, as a matter of fact. But in my defense, when I found out that like you were donating part of your proceeds to charity, I couldn't bring myself to take money out of that pot. I was like, no, give whatever you were going to give me to charity. Like, they need it worse than I do.
We're about to send coffee for the first time to Grindstone Ministries. I reached out last week to one of their guys that I communicate with, and I said, hey, instead of cash, what if we send the guys actual coffee that they can deploy with? And he was like, that could be better than cash.
I mean, I've seen the kind of work Grindstone does. They were down here they were further south from me than for Hurricane Ida, and I mean they do great work everywhere they go. But yeah, that's another group of guys I gotta reach out to and try to entice onto the show.
I could put you in contact with some of their people for sure. Yeah,
please do. Maybe I can convince them to hit y'all up for bunker beans and take up roasting, because I don't know, those boys are pretty whooped by the time they get done with the project. So maybe ground already ready to go is the way.
That's what I'm sending, all ground. Fed. Yeah, just easy as easy as it can get for them.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But let's go ahead and roll this one out. This is Matter of Facts Podcast with James Walton, the Intrepid Commander from Prepper Broadcasting Network. Otherwise known as the head hooligan, the herder of cats, and the person that keeps all of us nutcases in the asylum.
I love all of those titles. Another t-shirt.
Matter of Facts Podcast heading out. Say goodnight, everybody.